Hello, I'm Wendy Brickman of Brickman Marketing, host of the monthly Brickman Banner Show. Today, as my very, very special guest, I'm pleased to have author Dr. Barbara Mossberg. Welcome, Barbara.
I'm so excited and happy, Wendy, to be on your show.
I'm happy to have you. You're a very special guest, and our viewers will find out why.
Oh.
So, first of all, tell us about your very interesting background and your very distinguished career.
Well, thank you for that compliment. There's a theory. I have the theory of my career. I just reread my LinkedIn description, which I wrote ages ago. I don't remember writing it, but I said I wanted to be an encouraging resource for creativity and passion and optimism of each person, so that people know how they matter utterly to our world, and they bring appreciation for each other and our earth, this possibility of goodness and respect and reverence and gratitude for the gift of consciousness. So that's, what I want to do. And
Right.
I think it's important for leadership and teaching. And so I have had these roles as a professor of tragedy, comedy, American literature, playwriting, memoir. I've been an actor. I am an actor. I'm a radio host, a playwright, a board member,
Wow.
an educational leader. I've gotten to serve in all kinds of roles, from program heads, deans, vice provost, president of Goddard College, a scholar. My first book was on Emily Dickinson, When a Writer is a Daughter, and a civic activist for the humanities, and as really a cultural diplomat. And I've been a senior Fulbright, a scholar twice, and I've had a federal appointment as the scholar in residence for the U.S. Information Agency, representing us in about, maybe 20 countries around the world on who we are through the lens of literature, the lens of poetry and story, and the power of story to change the world. And I think in all of these different ways, I try to serve and to bring encouragement for expressing your voice and what we each have to contribute to the world, wanting to encourage that.
All right, that's quite a noble goal that you're accomplishing with your writing and all of those other roles. So I'm starting to explore Pacific Grove more. It's really a special place. And you were the Pacific Grove poet in residence. Tell us a little bit about that role.
Well, pinch me. To be a California laureate in this town that is so beautiful. Right on the main street across from City Hall, you can buy a ladder or a wagon. I mean, I just love that. It is so devoted to the arts. Can you imagine that it has this position? And I'll tell you how I got to be it. And it tells you about the city. I came in for this interview, and there were representatives of the mayor and city council, the school district, the publisher of the local paper, the head of the arts commission. And I walked into this interview and I said, ink is dripping from the corners of my lips. There is no happiness like mine. I have been eating poetry.
That's cute.
And it was so fun. So what was the job of poet in residence? And I ended up actually being in residence for 5 years, but I'm still really serving as the poet in residence. It was really exploring, what does it mean to be in residence, to be the poet? So I felt really responsible for articulating the experience of walking around, being on the sidewalk, being in the stores, being in the schools, being on the councils and the boards. And I organized flash mobs and Occupy Cannery Row with Emily Dickinson. We broke into art galleries, things chanting Neruda poems. We did programs in the gazebo, in the park, and in the little room. I went into the schools and taught sonnets to 6th graders on how to solve problems. Did workshops in the morning. And my motto was, no place safe from poetry.
There you go.
It was so glorious. It was just nonstop shenanigans. And I was so supported. And for every occasion, there would be poetry. So there was for Day of the Dead, Arbor Day, Earth Day, Persian New Year. And we would organize things. We would be in the library. Emily Dickinson's birthday, I did a one woman play set in her kitchen. For John Muir's birthday, I did a program on John Muir. So for any excuse whatsoever.
Break into poem.
Yes, and we organized a gallery show where we asked artists around the world to submit their work on flowers inspired by Emily Dickinson's poetry. We collaborated with other laureates in California, had traveling exhibitions. So we had programs going on all the time.
That's great.
It was so marvelous, Wendy. And it's still going on. We still have the Poetry Collective and all of these things that we organized.
And you'll be back at Pacific Grove soon.
Yes, I will.
In August 1st.
August 1st, I am looking forward to that. I mean, it's going to be fantastic.
And you've been to the Pacific Grove Arts Center where we'll be. Such a great 1910 building.
Well, that is where they were having an opening. Maybe I shouldn't tell you this, but they were having an opening of an art exhibit. And so we did a flash mob, and this was, leading citizens of the town chanting Neruda's poetry. We came in and people were standing there like, what? So no, I love that art center.
Yeah, it's a great space. So I'm glad you'll be joining us. So you have a brand new book published by Pacific Grove Books entitled Here for the Present, a grammar of happiness in the present imperfect, live from the poet's perch. So tell us the significance and story behind this intriguing title.
Well, so first of all, trying to be the poet in residence, what does that mean? And so I began to think about not only myself as the poet in residence, but how could the way that I would express what it meant to be in this community, how could I inspire everybody to feel that they are poets in residence? That you would walk down the street, you would look out the window on a rainy day, you'd walk into a supermarket, and you would look through a poet's eyes. So the strange becomes familiar, the familiar becomes the strange and holy and precious and hilarious and beautiful. So the title comes from this idea. Beverly Cleary, also a resident of the peninsula, wrote Ramona the Pest. And Ramona is 4 years old and she's finally going to kindergarten. She's so excited. And as soon as she gets there, the teacher says to her, sit here for the present. She goes, oh God, I knew it was going to be a good day, but I get a present. And so the day's going on and she's not budging. And finally the teacher says to her, Ramona, why aren't you getting up and doing the activities? And she says, well, I'm sitting here for the present. The teacher's going, what? She goes, the present. You're giving me a present. And the teacher goes, Ramona, the present, for the present means right now, for the here and now, just right now. And Ramona says, you mean we're not going to get a present? And I really thought about that, because what if we consider being present, our presence, as a present, the gift of consciousness? And so this idea, there's actually a grammatical term called the Present Imperfect. And I thought, this world is definitely imperfect. It's often chaotic and tragic and confusing and frustrating. But what if our, our presence, being conscious in the now, gave us a sense of gratitude and gift? And so that is what it is about. It's about this idea of transforming whatever it is that you see. And it could be sordid, it could be mean, it could be meaningless, but to see it with wonder and to transform any place into Wonderland.
Okay. Sounds like a great goal. So within the book, can you describe some of the parts of the book and how that relates and why you chose to share them?
Well, so each of the books is a play on being present in our world and the various ways that we can be present, that I'm sort of showing us as a guide, where gratitude is called for, walking down the street. And we may know our way so well that you don't have to look around, but what's lost if you don't look? So in a way, these are homages to getting lost, squinting, what I call hospice chic. We're in my mother's assisted living and hospice. We're in a sauna in Helsinki, and it's sort of magical realism. John Muir is naked. In one poem, I'm naked. We're making lemon meringue pie. We are in the zoo. We're, all of these different places. And the plot really is, how can we see what is holy and precious and hilarious about these various scenes? And so the chapters are in plein air, or in the scene, or the present, and so on. And I really think that, the people have said that this is a new Walden. And considering that I'm afraid of being in the woods, that's a little hilarious, although I love Thoreau. But I see it as sort of a kind of a comic Walden, or divine comedy. And yes, there is a hell, but we go through to the light. And so that's sort of the plot, that there's a happy ending. We see ourselves, we might be like Dante in the Inferno. We're lost on the path and there's these fanged and snarling creatures in our path. But the poet comes and leads us to the light. And so I guess I'm saying, in whatever the situation is that I'm describing, hold on, help is at hand. We're going to look through the poetic lens. So whatever we brush by or overlook or feel frightened by, or in between moments, I feel that we can find the treasure in what we trash and stash, and the momentous meaning and the actual joy in the most ordinary moment.
I agree. I think, well, the book inspires you to stop and smell the roses. It's kind of a trite
Literally
expression. Yeah.
Literally, the last poem in it was called The Majesty of Grace on 18th Street, which is the poet's perch, where the poet
Pacific Grove
gets to live. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And it's walking down the street, and it says, you may not think when you're watering your roses or you're painting your fence that you are doing something that makes people feel so grateful to be in this world. You may not realize this kind of tremendous role that you play. and that we play for each other, just walking down the street and the way we live our lives.
Okay. So what would you like people to take away from reading your wonderful book?
Well, I would love people to take away that in any moment, no matter where you are, in your parents' hospice, in a store that isn't open yet, and your daughter is hungry, just walking down the street, whatever the moment is, that you can find the joy in it and the beauty. And I guess I keep coming back to these words, but what's holy and hilarious. I think that there's something about comedy that lifts us out of the most serious realities of our own mortal lives. We suffer. We are here for the present. It's a very short time here on earth, and we do suffer. And I really would love people to know that through comedy, this is really stand-up memoir. It's improv philosophy, that it's sort of a DIY, getting joy out of the day.
With an assortment of talk about a few more vignettes. They're kind of like vignettes to me when I saw it. Like, here she is, and now she's here. Here she is.
Right. It's the whole variety. I mean, there's
Of your
literally
life.
a recipe for lemon meringue pie.
Oh, that was good.
You're in my mother's room at assisted living with me, or you're in my imagination with me, with John Muir in a sauna. All of these different places, you're walking down the street with me. You're in the store. And people have told me that, though that, a lot of these are very kind of emotional experiences, but they're funny. And I think I can't help, through the process of writing, having the happy ending, bringing us to the light. And so the vignettes are just these moments, and some of them are poetry, and some of them are this sort of like flash nonfiction, or what I would call memoir stand-up. And that's really what they are. It's just little stand-up.
Yeah. Well, it's charming to read, and it's inspiring. So why do you think poetry could change the world, or can change the world?
I do think that William Carlos Williams said, my heart rouses to bring you news that concerns you and concerns many men. And he goes, it's difficult to get the news in despised poetry, yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there. And you might say, well, of course he's going to say that because he's a poet. But actually, in his day job, he was a physician, and he was trying to save people's lives every day. And at the end of the day, literally with blood on his hands, he's going home, and on prescription pads, he's writing poems, not only to save his patients' lives, but to save his life. And that's his RX. And how can that be? How can a poem save your life? And how can words do that? And I think there is something transforming, because in a poem, you can be seen for how you know yourself to be. You can be seen as worthy and having dignity, and your sorrow can be seen, and your hopes and your fears. It's like a magic mirror that you hold up to yourself. And in that, your life is meaningful and hopeful, and you can get a different sense of possibility. And we know that poetry can change the world. When Thoreau was writing, there is more day to dawn, the sun is but a morning star, and all of these things, he may have thought in his own life, oh, I'm a failure as a poet. You know, people, are they even buying my books? But over time and space, his poetry fell into the hands of Gandhi in South Africa, who said, I can use this, I can be inspired and inspire independence movement in India from Great Britain. And over time and space, Martin Luther King picks up and says,
Right.
I'm so inspired, this can help us lead civil rights. This is words. This is just
Right.
somebody lifting their finger, literally. They're lifting up a pen and they're writing words that literally change the world and are transforming and healing. And I do think that no matter what it is you're feeling, my son died at the beginning of COVID. And it was so interesting because here I am, a poet, I'm a professor. What did people do? They sent me poems.
Oh.
And each poem, I just felt I can live. I felt so moved and I felt so connected to the world, and it was so healing to get all of these poems, and these were sent by people who aren't poets, but it was the way that people reached out. And I think that is the role that poetry plays.
I would say, and I want to ask you this, I think I asked you by email about music and folk music and the lyrics. How do they kind of dovetail into your
Well,
perception?
well, I have a poetry show actually that I've been doing. It's an hour a week since 2008, and it's called the Poetry Slowdown. And it's taken from Simon and Garfunkel's
Okay.
59th Street Bridge song. Slow down, you move too fast. You gotta make the morning last. And
Right.
how do you make the morning last? And he says, hello, lamppost, what you knowin'? I come to watch your flowers growing. Ain't you got no rhymes for me? Da 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 da, feeling groovy. And so as a musician and as a troubadour and lyricist, you have Paul Simon, you know, looking at the environment as give me your poems. And that's the way that we can make the morning last and be so happy. And it's music. And poetry was our earliest form of, in a sense, music in the world. It's the rhythm, it's the beauty of the language, it's the beat. And I think about what Andrew Lloyd Webber did with Cats from T.S. Eliot's Four Quartets, and Cats, memory, all alone in the moonlight. And all of the words from Cats are, you know, from T.S. Eliot. And soon it will be morning, a new day has begun. And maybe you and I could say, oh, it's morning. That's very different from saying, let a new day begin again. And so this beautiful way of using our voice and slowing down speech. And in a way, that is what poetry does. It just makes time stop. And it lets you live more consciously and maybe spiritually and emotionally and also intellectually. You're really thinking in new ways about your life. So through music and through poetry, which are just absolutely inextricably linked.
I mean, I feel that they are. A lot of people, quote unquote, drink their poetry with music. You know?
Yeah, so that's so beautiful.
No, but it's true. I mean, Bob Dylan or all of them,
And
whoever your favorite.
I'm moving myself now to plug myself in, but don't you love that Bob Dylan got the Nobel Prize in Literature?
Absolutely.
And I think of Joni Mitchell, and I just think of all of our troubadours who make music of our lives.
Wait, you better stop. We're gonna lose you now. I think you froze a little bit here. I think you reached the end. We may have to redo this part. I lost you there. I did lose you. You froze.
Oh, okay. Well, we stop time, Wendy. See, poetry slows stops time. It really plays with our sense of time and experience. And I mean, that really is true. We're living our lives, we're hurtling, and all of a sudden to read a poem, you literally have to stop and you're considering a different.
Right, and ponder.
Yeah.
Well, how can people reach you? What is your website?
Okay. So, well, the website is barbaramosberg.com, and you can archive all of my poetry shows. You can reach me at Barbara Mosberg on Twitter. You can write me on email at barbara.mosberg@gmail.com. I will absolutely write you back. And I would love to hear. I would love to hear from people. And
after they read your book, they'll have a lot to say, or even before they read your book from this interview. So thank you so much, and thank you for everyone.
That would be good. Thank you. I am honored to be with you. It's a joy.
Thank you. And good night, everyone. Thank you, Barbara.